Here we are going to see the life cycle of a software development. My name is Hafiz and I'm a lead engineer. Before we see the life cycle of a software development, let's see what is the generic term of a life cycle. Life cycle is a series of changes in the life. So it's the step-by-step process of a certain life cycle event that occurs. So when you match that generic term into the software development or SDLC, we call it as a SDLC, software development life cycle. This is the process of designing, developing, and testing high quality software. This SDLC is used in software industry to measuring and improving the development tasks, which is aiming to produce high quality applications and reaching the deadlines and cost estimates. SDLC, or the software development life cycle, will be followed in each and every software projects, which helps to have a detailed plan to develop, maintain, modify, or enhance the software application. In high level, if you take this SDLC, it is kind of a framework, or you can take it as a methodology for the software engineering. If you think about how this actually works, so in SDLC, we outline every single task in a software development process, and it helps to reduce the wastages while doing developments, and it will increase the efficiency and effectiveness, and also it will allow monitoring our works during the software product development, and also stay on the right track throughout the timeline. So those are the basically what this SDLC does to make sure these software products are more robust and high in quality. There are certain phases of this SDLC. So as you can see here, first it starts with the planning, and we have defining the requirements, then moves to the designing phase, and then only the development works will be started by the software engineers. So once the product is developed, the testing phase will start by the quality engineers, and finally the release phase will happen, which is the deployment on the customer environment. And there's another additional phase other than these, so I'll mention that in later. Now let's see one by one what are these phases actually does. The planning phase is the very first stage that we're having in SDLC. So this is mostly done by the senior members in the organization, like the project managers and the customers and their stakeholders, architects, likewise. And here we basically identify what kind of a system that we have to develop, and we assess the feasibility of this system, and because we need to align the business requirement with the technical requirements, and we also create a detailed project plan with the specific timeline with the deadline, and also we are doing a rough calculation of the cost for the labor cost and the materials that we will be using to complete this project. And in this phase, we determine the project goals. So what exactly that this product is expecting, and what it should produce. And then we will prepare a project team and a leadership structure, like how many members should be there in a development team and how many members should be there in a quality engineering team. Likewise, we create a project team structure and also a leadership structure. So ultimately, the planning phase will clearly define the scope and the purpose of the project. Next, we'll see the second phase, which is the defining the requirements. So in the first phase, we have identified the requirements. In the second one, we are going to define the requirements. So here, mostly the documentation stuffs are happening, like the SRS document, which is the software requirement specifications, and some other documents will be prepared to clearly define the product requirements. So in this phase, we are gathering the business requirements and create process diagrams and a detailed analysis. So it includes identifying both functional and non-functional requirements also, and also includes the what are the resources that we are going to use to build this specific product. That is what basically we are doing in the second phase, which is the requirement definition phase. Next, we have the designing phase. The architecture of the product comes in this stage. So the high level architecture, what components are going to be there, and what kind of infrastructure that we are going to build. If it is a cloud based or a standalone, what kind of a system architecture of the system will be defined in this designed in this phase. Sometimes sometimes we are documenting these architecture documents in DDS, which is the design document specification. This design will be reviewed continuously by the identified stakeholders and recorrected accordingly if any changes required. Also, we determine what type of architectural modules and how those modules are going to communicate, whether it is HTTP, WebSockets, or etc. And how the data flow is happening, what type of a database that we are going to use, whether it is NoSQL or relational database, and what kind of a third-party integrations that we are going to do. And then we are going to identify the user interface prototypes. We are going to design the user interface prototypes by using like Figma kind of tools. And also in this phase, we are going to determine what kind of a programming language that will be the primary language that will be used in this development phase. And then we also design this security flow of the system. This is a very critical stage in the Sdlc process. So if the design is not solid, then entire development stage will be a utter failure. So next we have the development stage. This is where the actual construction of the system comes in. In previous stages, we all did the planning and documenting stuff and doing the designing stuff. So here where the developers are following coding standards and best practices and start doing the development of the features. So the proper design of the system will help to develop the product. So as I mentioned before, if the design is having failures, then the development might end with the drastic failure. In this phase, we also develop the IT infrastructure. So if it is kind of a cloud-based system like AWS, then we are developing the infrastructure, like how many EC2 instances are going to be established and what kind of a VPC and elastic beanstalk, and what likewise we are defining the infrastructure of this product, and also developing the database and the rest of the source code. So these are the stuff that basically happens in the development phase. So once the development is done, then we have to proceed to the testing phase. This is a collaborative phase which has a link to all the previous stages. So in each phase, we actually has to do the testing the design, testing the requirement specifications likewise. But in this phase, we mainly target the final product, testing the final product. That's what this phase is about. So this is a critical phase where it validates all the requirements against the software features and report the defects or issues and retest if required. So if we miss to test some features, then the customer might not be not getting that particular feature in our product. So it will be a really huge problem when it comes to the client satisfaction. So this testing phase is kind of a proxy in between the engineering process and the customer satisfaction. So the testing of this product has to be done very thoroughly. So there are a lot of other techniques will be used in this testing stage. So I'm not going to in detail on how these testings will be done. It's a separate area. Then the final stage. Actually, this is not the final stage. There's another stage in between. But so at the moment, let's see, this is the final stage. So this is where we do the releasing the final product that was developed and completed testing. In this phase, where we made the product available to the end users or the customer. This will be done after product is tested thoroughly, as mentioned before, and ready to be released. There are several ways of doing deployments. So I'm not going to go in detail how the deployments happening because it's a vast area. So just high level, I'll mention a couple of things. So sometimes we are having a UAT kind of environment. So UAT means user acceptance testing. So before we release the final product to the production, which is the customer environment, we first have a in-between layer called UAT. So we release it to that UAT environment, and both the customer side and the engineering side, they both do the testing on this. So if UAT test pass through, then the same release that we have done on the UAT will go to the production environment. These what kind of release environments and what kind of development environments are going to be in this project will be discussed during the planning and planning through defining requirements through the design phase. So this is already communicated with the customer, whether we need a UAT environment, whether we need a separate QA environment. Likewise, those are already discussed during the first three stages. In some projects, we are using CI/CD pipelines to automate the release process. CI/CD means continuous integration and continuous deployment. We use tools like Jenkins, those kind of Ansible kind of tools. So this also pre-communicated with the customer whether we have to use a CI/CD pipeline or it's a manual release kind of things. I'll try to do a separate video about these CI/CD pipelines and Jenkins kind of tools later. So these are the main phases of the SDLC, software development lifecycle, but there's another additional phase, which is the maintenance phase. This is some customers might require this maintenance phase, some might not require, because sometimes the customer itself, they do the maintenance stuff. But sometimes some stakeholders, they request the engineering team to do the maintenance or support things as well. So those are also pre-communicated during the pre-sales or the planning process. So in this phase, the development cycle is almost finished. So this phase this phase is also important. This is the phase where the use includes user level testing and identifying bugs. So these bugs will then be retested through a new development cycle. So there will be a production support or application support kind of teams. So the customer will report those bugs to that particular team, and then it will redirect back to the development team, and the new development cycle will initiate it. In this phase, we do necessary enhancements, corrections, fixing issues, those kind of things, and also we do the upgrading of the system to adapt future requirements. And as I mentioned, we do supporting the end users and helping them to use our final product. These are the life cycle development life cycle of a software product. So there are so many example, or there are so many frameworks that were defined using each of these phases. So let's see some of the examples. So there's one called waterfall model, and another one is called agile methodology. So this agile is very famous these days. And then we have the iterative model, and also we have another one called spiral model. Likewise, there are so many Sdlc methodologies available today. So these are separate topics to be discussed, because those are really wide topics. So I'm not going to go in detail about each of these Sdlc models. These are the things that I want to discuss today. We'll meet again in my next video.